Should euthanasia be legal in the UK? Oh, hi there, stranger. Today I'm going to be telling you about the case of Stuart Mungall and Joan Morrow. Viewer discretion is advised, and extra trigger warning, today's case is particularly sad. Stuart Mungall was born on the 20th of March 1940 in Angus, Scotland. He had a happy upbringing and was just 15 years old when he decided to become an actor after James Dean passed away. He thought he could take over from him. Over a decade later, he would join a small theatre company in Scotland. Whilst there, he was invited to watch rehearsals for the play A Christmas Carol. And so Stuart was sitting in the nearly empty auditorium of the Royal Lyceum Theatre in Edinburgh when he became captivated by one of the actresses, Joan Morrow. Joan was born in Australia in 1941, and her mother sadly passed away when she was only 4 years old, and Joan did not get along with the woman that became her stepmother. Joan was 23 years old when she moved to the UK, looking for a better way of life and with aspirations of becoming an actress. She got a job with the Bristol Old Vic Theatre Company, which paid £7 a week, and she went on a world tour for 6 months, which included the famous Broadway in New York. During this time, she met and became fast friends with another gigging actress by the name of Jane Asher. Jane would also go on the 6-month world tour with Joan. Jane also happened to be the long-term girlfriend of Sir Paul McCartney. This was long before he was a Sir. Joan, of course, was not familiar with the Beatles, having only just arrived from Australia. Stuart would later describe that first encounter where he watched Joan rehearse for A Christmas Carol as love at first sight. Joan was 27, Stuart 28. They would be cast together in the theatre's next production, Toad of Toad Hall. Stuart played Weasel and Joan played Lucy Rabbit. Luckily for Stuart, Joan was also smitten, and after a short romance, the couple married on the 11th of May 1968. Jane Asher was a bridesmaid, and the couple would remain friends with Jane throughout their lives, although her relationship with Sir Paul McCartney would fizzle out. Just before his relationship with Joan started, Stuart had been in a brief relationship with another woman, which had resulted in her pregnancy. They had decided to adopt their little girl out, and Stuart had been honest with Joan and she accepted the circumstances. And so Stuart and Joan got stuck into married life. Stuart continued working as an actor wherever possible and would go on to star as the lorry driver in the Yorkie adverts, back when they were not for girls in the 1970s. He would also star in The Guardians in 1971, Churchill's People in 1974, and The Campbells in 1986. The couple were not precious about working other jobs to supplement their incomes, with Stuart reflecting his role in the Yorkie adverts and working as a real-life lorry driver, and Joan selling cigarettes at Woolworths. They worked together on and off screen and had a happy and fulfilled marriage. From the Yorkie bar advert fee, they bought a small stone cottage in France where they would holiday whenever they could. They rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Tooting, South London, where they stayed for the duration of their marriage. They didn't outgrow that flat because they didn't have children. And then in around 1984, Stuart's daughter reached out to the parents that had given her up and they formed a relationship. Joan also got along well with Stuart's daughter. Joan had had enough of acting and decided she wanted to dedicate her life to gardening, and so the couple sold their cottage in France and bought a garden centre in South London. Stuart joined her as partner as it was gruelling work, but they loved it. Stuart called it their heaven. It was called the Independent Republic of Patio. They had a happy life together and were content with what they had. Stuart said that Joan was a fantastic actress, much better than him, but that she lacked the killer instinct to go far. It seems to me as though Joan never had a hunger for the fame and riches, that she just wanted to do what she loved, and I love that for her. And then around 2005, Joan started to show some worrying symptoms. She would lose balance often, and then one day Stuart only just caught her before she keeled over. Joan was taken to hospital where she was diagnosed with a heart attack and then a stroke. It soon became clear that something else was at play, as Joan was also displaying symptoms of Parkinson's. Her old friend Jane was president of Parkinson's UK and so connected Joan with the appropriate people. Joan would eventually be diagnosed with Pick's disease, a degenerative brain disease with similar symptoms to Alzheimer's. Stuart then became Joan's full-time carer, her body stiffening over time to the point where Stuart had to do almost everything for her, doing her hair, washing her, and such like. He said it was okay for him, but undignified for her. Joan began to struggle to feed herself, and mobility was also an issue, and so sometimes she wouldn't be able to make it to the toilet on time. Stuart said that Joan would often say, "Shoot me, get me out of this." And then in autumn 2010, Stuart was told that Joan had around 3 months left to live. He understood that this meant that she would have to go into a hospice for care, be fed through a tube, and so on. He said that he knew they would look after her, but that they didn't love her like he did, and he didn't want anybody else looking after Joan. By December 2010, both Stuart and Joan were struggling with their situation. And so, after an extremely difficult day with Joan being in immense pain, Stuart put a pillow over her head and suffocated her until she passed away. Stuart then went into the kitchen where he swallowed a load of Joan's strong painkillers, but then he said he suddenly remembered their cat, who Joan wouldn't want abandoned. So he called a neighbour and told them what he had done. He would be taken to hospital by ambulance where his stomach would be pumped and Stuart would survive the day. He was charged with Joan's murder and held at Belmarsh for 4 months. He said he had to share a cell with 2 other men who he said were, quote, probably murderers. Cheek. Stuart organised Joan's funeral from prison but was not allowed to attend. Jane Asher would speak at her dear friend's funeral, fully in support of Stuart. She said, quote, "I have never seen 2 people more entirely and devotedly in love." Jane would also write to the judge on Stuart's behalf. Stuart pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He would eventually be sentenced for the mercy killing, and you're either going to be fully on board with this sentence or, like me, flabbergasted. Stuart Mungall was sentenced to 12 months in jail, suspended for 2 years. So nothing. He said he likes to think he, quote, carried her to the other side. I would have said pushed, but that's just me. He also said, quote, "Of course I know why I did it, but remembering it is quite difficult. Our life together was fun and it stopped being fun, not just for me, but for Joan as well." He said he did not feel guilty for what he had done to Joan, which I just feel like if you want to make this sort of pact, then it has to be really clear that both parties are willing. Stuart would later say that when he tried to take his own life, that was their deal, but he also admitted to taking Joan's life without her consent, and the 2 of those things just can't be true at the same time. And I may seem callous on this one, but I'm sorry, I do not agree with what Stuart did. He said he didn't want his wife to die an undignified death, but I personally don't see how being smothered by your husband of 40 plus years has any more dignity to it. And I don't know how I would feel in their situation, I know that. But it just doesn't sit right with me. How do we know that this is what Joan wanted? Because Stuart said so, so we must just believe the man that killed her, that his only intention was to take her pain away. Or, and hear me out, they were married around 35 years before she got ill, and their whole marriage she was a talented, vivacious, independent woman. Outspoken, energetic, and full of life and love. And then the cruel degenerative brain disease hit her, and within 6 years she was a shell of her former self. Completely dependent on Stuart, unable to even move. And maybe Stuart just couldn't handle the responsibility of looking after somebody that was so sick. Maybe he couldn't stand to see that change in his wife, to watch her deteriorate in that way, mentally and physically. We'll never know. Stuart passed away in 2016. Would this whole thing have been easier if euthanasia was legal here in England? Yeah, of course, because then we would know if Joan for sure wanted to die. What are your thoughts on euthanasia, strangers? Please let me know in the comments. I had a lot more to say on this, but I've run out of time. So as always, if you've stayed with me up until now, thanks for watching.